And we are back, Bobby and Graham, with you again today. How's it going today, Graham?
Doing well. How are you?
It's a great day. For those who've been here the last few weeks, you'll notice I got my tooth back. Thank God
That's
for good
awesome.
dental work. And Graham, thank you for healthcare, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Happy to do it. I think it's required by
Yeah,
law, but I'll say it's out of the generosity of my heart.
there you go. Well, guys, we're back this week talking about what is going on in the world of Bitcoin, and we got some cool topics this week. To kick it off, one that's great. We've kind of talked a lot about over the last couple of years with Lightning. We're building Bitcoin and Lightning infrastructure for enterprises, and we've seen a lot of adoption of Bitcoin on chain, maybe a little less of Lightning because so much of Lightning is private. It's hard to really discern and understand the usage of it. And one thing that's actually come out in the last week that we are going to kick it off and start with today is this data we have here. So the state of crypto and Fortune 500 moving on chain. This was a pretty interesting stat, but out of Fortune 500 executives, 56% say they are working on chain projects. This is a pretty big deal, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Graham, but it's aligning with a lot of what we've been talking about over the last couple of months.
No, definitely. And I mean, I feel like we've kind of attributed probably a lot to like the ETF launch and stuff like that. But I mean, I think legitimately, as organizations see people like BlackRock, Fidelity, just name any of the ETF filers taking a serious bet on Bitcoin. And not only did they take the bet on like creating this ETF that then go, obviously profit from, but their CEOs, their executives, all these people are actually like being, they're talking about Bitcoin from like how innovative it is, what the problems that it can solve, all of these things. So it's not purely this kind of thing to increase profits, but it's also this new technology that is, creating completely kind of new experiences on the internet and real life, all of these things. So I think as organizations, Fortune 500s are looking at those kinds of people making those kinds of statements and bets for their company. If I was a Fortune 500 CEO, I would be like, we have to have a strategy around this. We got to be at least thinking and looking at something there. So I think it makes total sense, and I'm honestly surprised it's not more than 56%. But hey, we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be one of those things like in Bitcoin, we talk a lot about game theory, the game theory of mining, the game theory of having it on the balance sheet. And it's interesting, 56% of executives say they have on chain projects. This has to be just a snowball effect from here because you've got to be exploring it. You've got to be forming a position and a stance on this. And another stat I found super interesting, 1,000% rise in value of tokenized T bills. And there was a stat the other day, or maybe it came out this week that I saw Tether. I know they're like the 16th biggest, bondholder in the world, apparently, up there with G7 nations, but they're the number 3 holder in the world of the 3-month T-bill.
Hmm.
So the intersection of bonds and crypto is happening, and it's a very interesting just to broadly see.
Yeah, totally. And I think that I think it'll also be really interesting to see, like, we think about a lot of what's happened from kind of products and services in Bitcoin today are almost all created with via like startups, like people like us, like others that are building in the space, creating products and services to help make it, easy. But when we think about, okay, if 56% of the Fortune 500, 250 companies are looking at what they can do with on chain. I mean, I think it'll be really interesting to see what they come up with. I think there'll be a lot of like maybe just maybe not so interesting things, but I imagine there's going to be a few really interesting new services, ways of using it, ways of incorporating it, which I think will be really interesting. So I think that that's another really cool thing to think about and point out here is that, historically the builders have been all like early stage startups. But as we look at, okay, Fortune 500s are starting to look, build, do things inside of, I mean, this is crypto in general, but I mean, imagine them bringing things to Bitcoin. So I think that that's going to be really interesting too, as we see larger financial players getting involved in the building of this kind of, new asset class and all the things that go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other not small point, but small businesses. they're venturing into Bitcoin and crypto. It says about 7 in 10 of them, 68% or so, believe that Bitcoin and crypto can help address financial pain points, whether it be transaction fees or processing time. So it's cool to see, big and large, it's making an impact on the economy and just how businesses function.
Yeah, totally.
Nice. So this is something else. They were just talking about in the prior piece from Coinbase, the tokenization of assets. BlackRock is moving into this. Their fund actually passed Franklin Templeton with about almost like 400 maybe billion in assets, I believe, is what they shared.
Mm.
You can actually see it right down here. Yeah. So, excuse me, 382 million, which passed Franklin Templeton. So the tokenization of assets and
Mm.
securities, and we're seeing that as well from Tether, their new alloy product. They mentioned just yesterday the first tethered asset over collateralized on chain by Tether Gold. The tokenization and just putting assets onto a blockchain or a layer two is happening rapidly. For those listening, Taproot Assets is allowing this on the Lightning Network, and there's a lot of demand and desire for on-chain assets as well. But is everything going to be tokenized, Graham? Like, do you think what,
Yeah.
one thing I've always it's kind of like grinded my gears, you could say, is we've kind of fractionalized everything. Like, there's these platforms and websites now that let you buy like a fraction of Andy Warhol or a Basquiat piece, and whenever you have anyone and everyone bidding on these things, it kind of forces the value higher. But do you think we're
Mhm.
going to have everything tokenized? Tell me some of your thoughts on this, like what this broadly means.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think to the question of is everything going to be tokenized? Like, yes and no. I think that there's things that we saw in like 2018 of like putting tracking tomatoes on the blockchain and like tokenizing tomatoes and things like that. It's just like that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I don't think that literally everything will be tokenized for that reason. But I think that there is an increasing amount of obviously this technology like has a lot of benefits to it, and that's why stablecoins are popular and everything like that. So it's there's obviously I think a lot more kind of financial instruments will be tokenized. I think this particularly is very interesting. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it 100%, but it seems to be backed by assets that are backed by gold rather than just the T bills and the like kind of a corporate treasury type stuff. So I think that is interesting to bring different types of backing, I guess, to the assets themselves, where it's not all a single asset, especially dollars, which are we all know what the problem with dollars is by now. But I think bringing backing of assets from things that are other than dollars, things like gold, I think is really interesting. So I'm very interested to see kind of how this plays out and how they what kind of things are going to be issued on top of it, how much kind of adoption it has and things like that. So very interesting to watch and see kind of how they take it from here.
Yeah, paper fiat used to be backed by gold and now it's not, but now we have digital fiat backed by gold. This could theoretically bring more money into gold and drive the value of gold up if it's more accessible and tradable by people, like honest to God.
Yeah, that's actually like really funny when you think about it of like, yeah, the dollar used to be backed by gold. It is not anymore. And now we have like digital dollars on the blockchain that are backed by gold. It's just it's like coming full circle in this like really weird way.
Yeah. But yeah, more innovation from Tether. Pretty wild to see. So this is, it's off topic from Bitcoin, but it impacts Bitcoin and open source development. So GitHub is basically like, I guess maybe shotgun KYCing, maybe not, but they're requiring users to, because they're collecting sales tax, you need to update your address. So I don't use and live in GitHub every day. I know you and our engineers do, but there's been a lot of talk I've seen online of folks saying, ever since Microsoft bought GitHub, it's getting stricter. A lot of open source software is hosted on GitHub, if not all of it. And this is going to kind of further impede on the ability for maybe anonymous development and just, open source being able to be worked on. Code is speech, is it not? What does this mean just from the cypherpunk manifesto of Bitcoin and, Bitcoin being a
Yeah.
ground up movement, I guess?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I think that it's hard to know the real motives of this because I think that the whole reason for like them KYCing is like, oh, we have to charge tax now. So in order to know what is the appropriate tax to charge you, we have to know where you live and those kinds of things. So um, it's I think there's that's an important kind of distinction of like they're not literally just trying to tie what is your social security number to like this line of code that you commit. But that is to say, you can take it either way of like, well, there is that kind of connection in your identity and your code and all of these things. So I mean, I think that it's one of those things that is really challenging because and this goes to, we've had conversations as a Bitcoin community around GitHub specifically for a long time. Like, are we reliant too much as a community on GitHub? Do we need to start using other tools, other softwares, all of those kinds of things? And we haven't. I wouldn't say that we've necessarily landed in any particular direction besides just kind of like, we haven't had a need to do anything else yet. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. It's also interesting to know if like you need to do this kind of information on like a free account because GitHub has free accounts. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this rolls out. But ultimately, I think that being able to, I think it'll be increasingly important, I think, for developers to not have to identify themselves when they're doing any kind of contributions. And so I think that there will be people looking for alternatives in some way. Is that, an immediate kind of jump ship of GitHub, or is it, a more gradual thing as people become more and more have more needs in that regard? So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but it's one of those things that it's hard, and I think that there will be more things like this where it's like a service that has not necessarily any need to know anything about you. I mean, but they are kind of requiring it, whether it's via them directly wanting it or if it's some government requiring, hey, you need to KYC your users, even when it seems like it's something that's completely unnecessary. So I think that's a whole nother side of it is, is the government going to start requiring KYCing for everything? That's kind of a dystopian future to kind of paint there, but we're seeing ourselves KYC for more things, more, not less. And so that's a concerning trend, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I Googled a minute ago, a 20 terabyte hard drive you can buy for $250 online. Like in the next 5 to 10 years, it was at maybe 200 terabytes for $200 we might have. And then at that point, decentralized hosting becomes the norm in people's homes. I don't know, but I would hope that, there's a ways to do this, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
So cruising along here, we've talked quite a bit about liquidity and the commoditization of it, and we're seeing it continually heat up. Olympus, this actually came out literally 45 minutes ago. They have a web portal for purchasing channels for a node, even for non-Zeus users. So this is pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, I love what the Zeus team has been building. And this seems, like a great, it's an obvious thing for them to do. I mean, I think it's great to be able to have the support for the LSP spec 1, which is basically, the LSP spec is kind of a group that is creating a literal specification on how do you kind of purchase liquidity from a provider, all of those things. This spec 1 is the ability of just kind of purchasing a static channel, basically saying, hey, I want to buy 100,000 sats for this duration, and just kind of purchasing that. LSP, the spec 2, I think it's spec 2. I think things have changed, here and there, but spec 2 is like zero conf channel. So things kind of like what Breeze does or what we do in our Flow 2.0 product, to do zero conf channel opens on the fly. So that's all. So that's kind of the initial version of the specification. What Zeus did here is creating kind of a web UI on top of that, so you can make it really easy to purchase a channel for your node, and then thus just kind of expanding the amount of kind of places you can get liquidity, which I think is important for a lot of people that are running nodes, is really having more places. The more places, the better, generally speaking. So it's great to see Zeus kind of coming at it as well.
Yeah, awesome. Good work, Zeus team. All right. This was a good article that came out this last week from Roy, the CEO and founder over at Breeze, but talking about Lightning as the common language of the Bitcoin economy. And I thought this was timely because with it being layer two season, a lot of layer twos being vaporware, and more importantly, I think more relevant to like what's going on in Bitcoin with eCash, Fedimints, all of these things. Lightning is the language across all of these different protocols and networks. And really, like the key point in here he was speaking about is how whenever you speak to someone in another country, oftentimes if we're American, we only know our language, but in this other country, they're kind of forced to know language and their local language. And this is what's happening in Bitcoin is if you want to bring these other chains or protocols together, and when I say chains, I believe other blockchains are going to be like forced into bridging and integrating with Bitcoin. But Lightning is the one that does connect all of them from eCash to what was the other one I just mentioned? Excuse me, eCash, Fedimint, and so on. So I thought this was awesome, and it was good. I think kind of like planting a flag in the ground, like chill out, guys. Lightning's not dead. It's actually bridging all of these things together in a really functional way for people.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think that Roy does a great job in kind of his posts and his writing. So I think that this is just another good one. And really just kind of explaining the ways of it being kind of, I think in his, the way that he kind of put it just in this opening paragraph of like, you can talk about what is the platform that you're using to communicate, but you don't really ever talk about what is the language that we're going to use. You don't really, come prepared for a meeting of this is going to be in Spanish, English, whatever. I think for the most part, maybe there's some out there, but that's not how we operate as kind of a society, generally speaking. And so I think bridging that out into Bitcoin and Lightning and those kinds of things, I think makes perfect sense. And it also goes to it is very similar to English language. If you're in the U.S., we're all speaking English. As we go through the way that we anticipate kind of Bitcoin moving is as we look through, internet experiences and those kinds of things, it's all just going to be talking Lightning. And I think that this is a good kind of synopsis of that. And kind of, he puts a lot of detail into it, which I think is really well done.
Yeah, good deal. All right. And then one other piece, it's funny how quickly the tides can shift. It's been making headlines. Obviously, Trump has been very pro Bitcoin. He's been using words like self custody. And I believe he's even been saying like words like private keys and saying Elizabeth Warren will be kept away from your Bitcoin and crypto. And, supposedly there's a leaked email that the Biden admin will be attending a roundtable in DC. But what was the number? I think it's estimated that 95 million out of the 330 plus million Americans supposedly own Bitcoin or crypto. And, that's a pretty big, substantial amount of voters. That's about a third nearly. But this is good to see. I know a lot of folks say, separate government from Bitcoin, but, our world functions and operates through how the government is here. I don't think there's any way around it. I think it's kind of silly like fighting over that. What I think is good is having clarity, having support for this industry, because regardless of what individuals may think or the government thinks, this is, again, like from a game theory perspective, it's very important, for the sustainability of individuals, businesses, all the way up to nation states. But
yeah, no, I mean, totally. I think that, and I think we talked about it last week of like just that Bitcoin's actually kind of an election issue now. And you see that it's really kind of funny to see this from the standpoint of like the Biden administration, who has historically been, very anti-crypto, all of these things. And as soon as Trump's starting to look like he's, kind of being more welcoming of it, endorsing it, all of these things, they're completely not entirely 180 because they haven't, I wouldn't say they've done a lot of actual policy change, but they're warming up to it very, very quickly. So it's kind of like the obvious of how much of an election issue this has become. And so it'll be really interesting to see what plays out. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how the two kind of take it on. And it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this kind of roundtable for Biden and whatnot. But to me, it feels like Trump is actually kind of more serious about it, where it feels like Biden and his administration is just kind of like playing the game because it's obviously an election year. So we'll see what kind of. I think that Biden has the ability of actually kind of putting, not just talking about it, actually changing policy, doing new things, taking different kind of approaches. Where Trump obviously doesn't have quite that ability. So maybe Trump's maybe a little. Trump has the upper hand maybe, and that Biden doesn't actually. He has the ability of changing things, and he's not doing it. So it's just kind of words at this point. So that'll be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. It reminded me of what Nick shared, and thank the Lord for Nick, because he does such a good job of being almost like a scribe of these things going on, and he made a list of everything that has happened under Biden. And whenever you bully, block, and create this insane level of red tape that doesn't allow advancement or innovation, and then you flip last minute because the competitor that you really hate and dislike is gaining ground, it's hard to forget. We keep receipts on the internet. And there's been a lot where there's been resistance and just harsh overturning of demand from the market. But you're right, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously this is happening going into election season over the next 4 to 8 months. But what'll be really interesting is over the next 4 years, if it's kind of off the ballot, it's normalized, or is there still some cutthroat conversation around Bitcoin and crypto? It'll be interesting to see if it tames down or if it picks up even more going into the next election cycle.
Yep, definitely. It'll be an interesting one, that's for sure.
Yeah, but well, good deal. So yeah, that's all that we had planned for this week. I have a final question. I know we're going to be attending Bitcoin 2024 this year, and we're talking about going to Money 2020 as well, connecting with some other organizations there. But for you, what is the most exciting thing that you see coming, just based on everything that we've kind of talked and learned from our customers in the market over the last 2 years? Going into an election season, ETFs are approved, corporates are adopting. Where does that leave your mind, and how optimistic are you about Bitcoin and just the adoption going over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously bullish on it. I think that there's a lot. I think there's a lot that has happened over the last 6 months to a year, and I think that there's going to be a continuing amount of interest. I mean, I think that one of the things we've been holding on to the ETF thing for a while, and it's here now. It's almost like old news at this point. And so it's kind of like, okay, what is that next thing that is everyone's kind of holding their breath for? Which I don't know if we have it. Maybe we don't need it. I don't know, but it'll be interesting just to see how things continue to progress. But I mean, overall, I think that we're certainly moving in the right direction. I think the election will be it'll be a big deal in terms of what actually happens over the coming 4 years after that. So I think that there's a lot of things that are kind of happening that will be really interesting to see how they play out. And then I think the adoption is going to happen. I think I'm bullish in general. I think that it's just kind of the ways, the speed, all of those things are kind of the variables.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good deal. Well, hey, thanks for hopping on again this week. For everyone who tuned in, we appreciate you. Looks like about 169 people hopped in. So we'll be back next week, same time. Any topics you'd love to see covered, DM them, and we'll see you then.